Right. Good evening and welcome to the October 9th, 2023 City Council meeting. I am Mayor Ross and tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be available on the city's website. And thank you for joining us. It looks like we have great support for our police and fire tonight. So thank you for joining us. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Benson.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over Rob. I'm here.
Councilmember Watton.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Here.
Councilmember Washington.
Here.
Councilmember Christensen. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
And Mayor Ross.
I'm here. So council, please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And Councilmember Mayhew, would you please lead it?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we now move to our first item of regular business is to approve the agenda. Council may have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. This is moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilmember Christensen. Councilors, any discussion? Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, I'd like to move to add a discussion under Committee of the Whole on preliminary discussion of funding employee costs with property tax levy and utility rates.
Seconded.
So it's been moved by Councilor Mayhew and second by Councilor Benson to add preliminary funding employee costs.
Preliminary discussion of funding employee costs with property tax levy and utility rates.
Okay. Okay. Preliminary discussion funding employee costs with property tax and levy utility rates. Councilors, any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, it's unanimous. And so we will be adding that to council poll. Any further discussion on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, the agenda with the amendment passes. Thank you. Right. Next is presentation of interim fire chief Mike Bailey, and the King County Fire Chiefs Association Meritorious Award. Meritorious. Meritorious.
Evening, Council. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight to honor the good work that one of our volunteers is doing, the recognition he received for it. Volunteer EMT Robert Angersano, come on up. If I got to stand here, you got to stand here too, right? Robert has been a volunteer with our department since 2014, but has well over 25 years of emergency service as a volunteer with our departments. With Snoqualmie, he has been instrumental in numerous programs. He holds the position of lead volunteer and represents the volunteers at the monthly officer meeting, serves as a CBT instructor for EMTs, teaches first aid and CPR classes, and just recently developed and is teaching an opioid education and reversal class to the community. But tonight we are recognizing him for a recent award that he was given. In September at their leadership conference, Robert Angersano was given the Medal of Merit by the King County Fire Chiefs Association. We had a picture, but maybe it won't come up. See there from here, you can see him receiving the award from the board of the King County Fire Chiefs, from Enumclaw Fire Chief Randy Fair, Renton Fire Chief Steve Heitman, and Skyway Fire Chief Eric Hicks. Before he left, Chief Carrera nominated Robert for this award mainly on the merits of work on COVID-19. During the pandemic, Robert was the subject matter expert for the fire department as well as the rest of the city. He helped to research best practices and met with the fire department and city staff to discuss the science of the vaccine, as well as answer questions and help alleviate concerns for the staff. Robert was also instrumental in getting out the vaccine to our community. He worked with the hospital to set up the drive through vaccinations, as well as multiple vaccination events at the fire station during the pandemic. When asked by Chief Carrera how many vaccines he thinks he administered, he unassumingly responded over 10,000. So I just want to take a quick minute to read from the award that he got from the fire chiefs. King County Fire Chiefs Association is honored to recognize individuals within the fire service for exceeding the duty requirements expected of their position and who have demonstrated a distinct pattern of community service coupled with professional achievement. On behalf of the King County Fire Chiefs Association Executive Board, I congratulate you on being selected for the Medal of Merit. Demonstrated outstanding leadership and skills that positively impacted and inspired your fire agency and the community you serve. We value and recognize the effort that you put in for your work, and we appreciate you for being a part of the fire service team in King County. So part of that is he was given a certificate here. I'll let you hold that. As well as a medal to place on his uniform, the Medal of Merit.
Excellent.
So again, thank you, Robert. I appreciate your effort with our department. You're definitely a valued member of our department. Of course, as always, we gotta take a picture real quick.
Yes, we're gonna take a picture, but also, would you like us to say a couple few words or anything, or celebration?
Well, very dedicated to the city and to the community, and anything that I can do to help people, especially people in need or people that don't have a voice, that can't speak for themselves. That's what I've dedicated my life to since retiring, and I'm happy to do it and to do anything I can do to help this community. And that's the reason for the opioid training that I'm doing now. That seems to be the big thing that's happening right now, and hopefully we can make a difference there as well.
Thank you. So thank you for your service, and we'll get a picture.
Sorry, it feels so weird with just my camera.
Oh, this part.
Okay, thanks.
I'll let you have your balloon back.
And next, we have presentations of police awards by our interim chief, Brian Lynch.
As they reluctantly show up. Good evening. So I would like to say thank you first for allowing us to come before you tonight and do a little bit of celebrating. So over the course of a police officer's career, she may be able to look back on only a handful of days where they can say with any certainty that they had a positive impact during that shift. Most days we go to work hoping that we can make a difference, but many of those days we are left feeling like all we did was witness the worst in people. Then there are days like these officers experienced where they absolutely know that they saved a life. Historically, our police agency has not done a very good job of recognizing the extraordinary efforts that our men and women in uniform exhibit each day. But tonight I look to open a new chapter in our history by calling attention to these officers when they do great things. Over the past couple of months, I've reviewed several cases from previous 3 years and have found that these officers standing before you tonight are deserving of that attention. Unfortunately, not with us tonight is Officer Weary. He's traveling back from out of state tonight, and then Sergeant Draveling, who just got called out. If he makes it back, we'll include him. But we'll start out with their incident on the evening of April 28th, 2020. Sergeant Draveling and Officer Weary responded to a citizen assist at the Salish Lodge that turned out to be a robbery. They observed the suspect in the parking lot, and the suspect on a bicycle did not comply and took off. Suspect rode his bike onto the bridge over the Snoqualmie River, and he then attempted to climb over the railing of the bridge and made comments that he was going to commit suicide by cop. Due to the officer's quick communication and movements, that individual was apprehended before harming himself. The suspect even thanked the officers later on, even though he was under arrest. So in doing the review, I feel that their actions that night were a direct response to what they saw. And without that, he definitely would have probably gone over the edge. On November 14th, 2020, Officer Chase Smith responded to a business in North Bend. Beating the fire department there, Officer Smith used his quick instincts and training to provide life-saving CPR to a 65-year-old male who had collapsed. That was a happy ending to that because that person ended up surviving that incident. This doesn't happen very often. On January 7th, 2021, Officer Austin Gutwein used his training and quick thinking to perform life-saving CPR on a man that was first thought to be choking, but was found down with a heart attack and unconscious, unresponsive at a restaurant in North Bend. And prior to transporting to the hospital, he had a heartbeat and became a viable candidate for survival because of his quick actions. On May 15th, 2021, Officer Smith and Sergeant Weiss responded to Sandy Cove Park. They have a report of a female adult who had gone into the river to rescue her dog. And when she became distressed herself, had started to get swept away by the current. If we remember, in that time, there were high waters due to a heavy rainfall. The victim was able to work her way towards the edge of the river, where she was able to get herself and her dog onto a log. But the water was threatening to take both of them down the river. And the water temperature was also making it to where she wasn't going to last much longer where she was. So these two officers, not waiting for fire department instructions, not waiting to be asked to do anything, they jumped into action. And Officer Smith shed his vest and his duty belt, and Sergeant Weiss provided him with a rope, and he was able to climb out onto this log in the rushing water and grab both the victim and the dog and pull them to safety. Now, as crazy as that sounds, it actually happened the very next day again at the same location. This time, 65-year-old male went in after his 125-pound black lab, and they started to get taken down the river. And the circumstances and the events unfolded the exact same way as it had 24 hours prior. And that person and their dog were saved by these two officers, Officer Smith and Sergeant Weiss. So in each one of these incidents, the officer's quick response, recognition of the severity of the situation, and their immediate actions resulted directly in saving the lives of these people. A failure to act or actions delayed could have led to a tragic outcome. It is clear on these days, these officers went above and beyond their normal police duties, and because they did, these tragedies were averted. So on behalf of a grateful community, I say thank you to each of these outstanding officers. You actually have 4 of these. We're only going to make you hold. If you guys want to step up to the front, we'll take some photographs before we're done.
I want to know what a 125-pound lab looks like. It's enormous. 125 pound labs. I've seen that. 100-pound lab. I didn't know they got that big. Like great. Like
So again, congratulations to our officers and sergeant for everything you've done for our community. So thank you. So now we move on to AB 23-120 Fire Prevention Week proclamation. So each year, the National Fire Protection Agency promotes fire safety nationally through Fire Prevention Week. The Snoqualmie Fire Department partakes in Fire Prevention Week and plans to visit all the pre-kindergarten through third grade classes in the school to deliver a fire safety presentation. So whereas the city of Snoqualmie is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Snoqualmie, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at the greatest risk from fire, and whereas home fires killed more than 2,285 people in the United States in 2022, and whereas cooking is the leading cause of home fires in the United States, accounting for almost half of all US home fires. And whereas children under age 5 face a higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in a cooking fire. So whereas the 2023 Fire Prevention Week theme, cooking safety starts with you. Pay attention to fire prevention. So, Ross, Mayor of City of Snoqualmie, do you hereby proclaim the week of October 8th through the 14th, as Fire Prevention Week. And the theme, cooking safety starts with you, pay attention to fire prevention. So the rest of it you can read online. So Chief Bailey, did you want to say a few words?
Mayor, just real quick, just wanted to point out that this is a very important message. Our firefighters do a really great job of getting out to the schools. We've done this for since I've been here, 24 years, getting out to all the kindergarten through third grade classes that the teachers invite us, where they give a fire safety message, get in front of the kids, get down on their level, put on their bunker gear, show them that it's not something they should be afraid of a firefighter. So, although we do this throughout the year as requested, this is the one time, in October when we try to get out to every school. So just wanted to thank the mayor for the mission, and then also just the school districts for allowing us to come in, and for the firefighters to really make it a priority to get out to these classes and meet with kids and hear the message that the firefighters have for them.
Great. Thank you. So at this time, we provide time for residents to comment on items not on the agenda. First, a few ground rules. Snoqualmie residents who are not present have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient, orderly manner. Therefore, comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Please wait to be recognized and state your name and city of residence, and direct your comments to the council as a whole and not to individual members. To ask questions of the council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. So with that, is anyone to speak to any concern that is not on the agenda this evening? If so, please raise your hand in City Hall or online. Not seeing anyone online raise their hand. And anyone's. All right. Moving on, we have the consent agenda. It contains approval of the city council meeting minutes dated September 25th, 2023. Approve the claims approval report dated October 9th, 2023. AB 23-079 Meadowbrook Farm Operations and Maintenance Services Agreement. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second that.
It's moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and seconded by Councilmember Washington. Is there any public comment regarding any of these items that are on the consent agenda? If so, please raise your hand. I'm looking online and in City Hall, and I do not see anyone raising their hand. Councilor, is there any discussion? Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, I have a question about Agenda Bill 23-079, which is one of the items in the consent. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Section 6.1 talks about indemnification, and I didn't pull this because I just, don't know what this says. It appears to say to me that City of Snoqualmie is agreeing to indemnify City of North Bend employees if, sorry, to indemnify against things that North Bend city employees may do. So it didn't seem to me that was willing to, in fact, I wonder if it's even legal for us to do that, but maybe I'm just not reading this right, or maybe there's a wording. I just wanted to understand 6.1 and whether it actually says what I'm worried about.
Yeah, that.
Sure, I can address that. So the intent behind this was that each party indemnifies the other party for its own employees, as it says here. Negligent conduct associated with this agreement by the party, its employees, officials, subcontractors, volunteers, or agents. So the idea was Snoqualmie's employees commit some negligent act that results in property damage or personal injury. We indemnify the other cities if they get sued because of our employees' conduct, and vice versa. If a North Bend employee commits some act of negligence and Snoqualmie gets sued for it, North Bend indemnifies the city of Snoqualmie.
Could I ask a follow-up, Mayor? Mayor, okay if I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that would probably be the intent, and that completely makes sense to me. But when I read it, it doesn't seem to be that that's what it actually says. So the words I'm focusing on, it says, each party to this agreement agrees, yada, 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 arising out of or in any way resulting from any other party's action.
Oh, I see. Yeah, actually, that's a good catch because that's inconsistent with the rest of the sentence, which says default or failure of performance, negligent conduct by the party. So good catch. We'll circle back to North Bend and make sure that that's cleared up.
So, Mayor,
Yes.
point of order, is it possible for me at this time to remove this item from the consent agenda?
And have further discussion or?
Well, no, just so that we could approve the rest of the consent agenda. It sounds like this item is going to need to be revised and come back to us.
Unless, I guess, what's the wording? We're just changing 2 words.
I think you could approve the consent agenda subject to a modification to 6.1 to delete that word other party.
Yeah.
That's that phrase, other party.
Or is it any party? Any other parties?
It would be, if you deleted that, then you'd be indemnifying any way resulting from any default failure of performance or negligent conduct associated with this agreement by the party, its employees, officials, subcontractors, volunteers, which I think was the intent. I think in somebody's editing that just didn't get crossed out.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
So I believe I agree with your intent, though I would prefer that we take this off consent agenda and handle it down in the committee section so that we can properly motion that change and have it noted there. It's unusual to have consent contingent upon. Consent is consent.
So is that a motion then?
Yeah, I move to remove this consent and move it down under, I guess, Parks and Public Works.
I second it.
Or I think CD, Community Development. Okay. That's moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilor Johnson to move it to the Community Development portion. Committee report. Oh, it's under F&A actually.
Yeah. Department of Community Development. This is the agenda.
Okay.
The F&A.
Big catch.
No, if it was community development, it goes to community
Okay.
development.
Yes. Okay. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Oh, is there something else?
Any
Point of
opposed?
order,
Nay?
Mayor, I don't believe a motion to remove from consent requires a vote. Any council member can move an item from consent.
It is F&A.
But I think in this case, you'd already approved the
Right.
So
now we
I
have
think I have
motion.
to
So now
have a
we have to
motion
take
to
a
undo
motion.
it. Yeah.
All right.
It actually was, it's Community Development Department, but F&A Committee.
All right, so move to F and A.
Okay, move it to F&A. So we're voting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, so we moved it to F&A. So back to the original consent agenda. So that's just meeting minutes and the claims approval that I've already read in earlier. Any further comments or discussion? Nope. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Right, so the consent agenda passes with the amendment of moving Meadowbrook to F&A area. Okay, moving on to next is ordinance AB 23-023, amendments to SMC Chapter 3.10, multifamily property tax exemption. So this is the second reading of ordinance 1280. Councilmember Johnson, would you please read the summary and motion?
The attached ordinance is a repeal and replacement of Chapter 3.10 SMC Multifamily Housing Property Tax Exemption and accompanying draft amendments. The program began in 1995 and was codified as RCW Chapter 84.14 to incentivize residential development in urban centers by providing property tax exemptions for 8-year, 12-year, and potentially 20-year exemptions if certain criteria are met on new, expanded, and or updated multifamily housing. The exemption applies only to the residential portions of newly constructed improvements, not the value of the land, retail space, or existing improvements. Let's see, where's the motion? I assume I could just change the wording here to just say move to. Yeah, okay. Move to usually we have it written out a little better than that. Okay, if I could just rephrase this then. Move to approve, what's the number here? AB 23-023.
Second.
So let's move.
Do I have to authorize the mayor to sign something? I have to say that? No, okay.
No, okay. Okay, moved by Councilor Johnson and second by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. Is there any public comment regarding this item? If so, please raise your hand. I'm looking online. And also in City Hall chambers. I'm not seeing anyone. Okay. Councilor, is there any discussion? Again, this is the second reading, so they've already reviewed it and discussed it. I think we even had a public hearing on it. So, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to next bill is AB 23-115, amendments to SNC Chapter 17 accessory dwelling units, ADU regulations. This is also the second reading of ordinance 1279. Councilmember Johnson, would you please read the summary and motion?
Changes to state law will require cities to allow 2 ADUs per residential parcel. Move to adopt ordinance 1279, amending the Snoqualmie Municipal Code pertaining to accessory dwelling units.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Johnson, second by Councilmember Christensen. Is there any person wishing to make public comment? I will look online or also in the council chambers. Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Okay, is there any discussion? This is Councilor Benson.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I'm a little jealous that the state thought of it before we did, because this is just a great way to crowdsource our affordable housing problem. I think this is fantastic.
Great.
So way to go, state. I don't get to say that very often.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes and the accessory dwelling unit ordinance is passed. Okay, moving on to committee reports. So public safety, the first committee report is AB 23-121, Sunnyside Jail Interlocal Agreement. Councilmember Christensen, would you please read the summary and motion?
Sure. The purpose of this agenda bill is to authorize approval of a new 2023 to 2024 interlocal agreement, ILA, with the city of Sunnyside for jail services. The ILA provides for fees to be paid for the long-term confinement, long-term meaning 30 days or greater, of prisoners after they've been sentenced. So I don't see the actual motion written on there, but move to approve the 2023-2024 interlocal agreement with Sunnyside Jail and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
This has been moved by Councilmember Christensen and second by Councilor Johnson for AB 23-121. Is there any public comment regarding this item? So please raise your hand. Okay, not seeing anyone in City Hall or online. Council, do you have any discussion or would you like to hear any comments from our interim Chief Lynch? Councilor Christensen.
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of information. So as you all may recall, the costs for housing inmates in the state have gone up significantly. And we've already been notified that the prices will continue to rise. In addition, we've run into situations where there is a lack of local available jail cells to hold our inmates for a number of reasons. And that puts a strain on our police department. They basically take time out of their days to go ahead and transport folks, sometimes all the way over to Score Jail, which is located in Des Moines, Washington. Accordingly, in an effort to save money, time, and police resources, Captain Lynch and Officer Mandray recently went out to Sunnyside Jail to evaluate whether the jail would fit the city's needs. As it turns out, it looks like it does. If approved by council, Sunnyside Jail would pick up these inmates who are subject to a longer term confinement. There's a shuttle that happens on Fridays that would take them out there, and they'll house, feed, and care for them there. At the end of their sentence, Sunnyside would provide them with a bus ticket back to the jurisdiction, I believe, that had them incarcerated in the first place. This would save us money, a significant amount, as it turns out, and also save police time. Additional things to note on this are that despite the lower costs, it looks like the levels of service are actually in some cases better. There hasn't been an inmate death at the Sunnyside Jail ever. And in addition to that, it's actually accredited with the federal government because I believe it holds a contract with the state marshals. So it looks like, again, despite the lower costs, it looks like levels of service are actually pretty good, even better in some cases. Accordingly, the recommendation coming out of Public Safety Committee is to authorize the mayor to sign.
Great, thank you. Councilor Washington?
Yeah, no, just kind of walking through this, reading through it, it comes with a substantial cost savings. So thank you. Looks good. My question is around the retaking of inmates, section number 18. So I can just read it real quickly. Upon request from Sunnyside, city shall at its expense retake any city inmate within 36 hours after receipt of such request. In the event the confinement of any city inmate is terminated for any reason, city shall at its expense retake such inmate at the Sunnyside facility. What would warrant such a retaking of an inmate?
Our
Great
interim
question.
Chief Lynch will respond.
Great question. So from my time over there and talking to them, the only thing that would cause them to want to remove an inmate from their facility would be extreme acts of violence towards other inmates. They're not in a individual cell atmosphere. They're in a pod atmosphere with 16 beds in a room. It's more like a bunk room. So they have ways of segregating those people out to different pods to see if they can get a personality to work well with a group that they have. But if absolutely all else fails and they still have time on their sentence, they will call us. And at that time, we'll have 36 hours to set up transportation. We'll have an officer to go over there and pick them up and have to bring them back over here and put them in Score or Issaquah jail or the King County jail. But that would be the only time that would happen. I would probably think maybe like a medical outbreak.
Okay.
If they had a COVID outbreak and they needed to shut down for a while, we may have to go pick people up and bring them back over. But those are the only things that come to mind when I think about them terminating a stay for an inmate. Hope that answers your question.
It does.
And we felt like the 36 hours was very reasonable for planning to be able to, it's not, hey, you got to come get this guy right now. And it's a 4-hour drive over there in traffic. 36 hours is reasonable for us to plan for an officer to go do a transport.
Okay, okay. One follow-up question.
Sure.
Can I have a follow-up question with Chief Lynch? So if that were to happen, Chief, so I'm assuming we wouldn't have a contract at that point with SCORE. So would there be an additional, I mean, there's obviously going to be additional costs, but what would be the rate at that point?
No, we still have the contracts at Issaquah Jail and SCORE.
Okay.
And we're still paying the high rates of non-guaranteed beds at SCORE. So we're talking anywhere from $145 to about $250, depending on what services they're having. That's per day. So like I said, in the right now, as we sit, this department is housing 7 long-term inmates, and we're paying those rates. Once this is done, if by chance they're not going to have 7 beds for us, they'll probably have 2 or 3. But if we could move 7 over, that's a savings of $56,000 between now and the spring when the last person's supposed to get out.
Absolutely makes sense. Thank you.
If something goes wrong, we have to go pick them up, we bring them back, and then we're right back to where we were before we signed this.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Thank you.
Councilor Mayhew and then Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Yeah, so I thought I understood this going in, but now I have questions. So I just want to be to 2 questions, I think. One is I just want to be clear. This is for housing folks that are going to be incarcerated between 30 days and 365. We don't incarcerate more than 365 because none of that would be a violation of some state law. It wouldn't be us.
You can do 364 days in our court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's between 30 and 364.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's what I thought. And then the second question is, I just want to be clear, we wouldn't be doing the initial, like if an arrest is made, the initial placement wouldn't be to Sunnyside. This would be after a conviction. Is that correct?
Only after a sentence is handed down.
Okay.
So after the adjudication of the case, and they've got a time of 30 days or more, Sunnyside they prefer to take somebody that has 30 days or more to make it worth their while.
Sure. Okay. And so in the meantime, when arrests are made, we'll continue to use the facilities we currently use.
Issaquah or SCORE.
This gets us a saving on the longer term.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, you good?
I found it. Never mind, I passed.
Councilor Johnson.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly that our officers would not have to go with this inmate to Sunnyside. They send a shuttle, pick them up, and they take them.
Yeah, that's another great question.
Yeah, I was curious about just how far it was, and I don't know. I was just a little bit worried about that, but it sounds like if
so
that's not going to take an officer off of our streets, then
no. The way that it works over here, when we book somebody in, we have to physically be there to Issaquah or SCORE or King County because we are the jurisdiction putting them in the jail.
Okay.
Once they're found guilty and they're sentenced, it's up to the court. We can petition the court to say we would like a transfer order, and they will write out a transfer order. The judge signs it, and this piece of paper becomes us. So when the jail van comes on Fridays, they hand the paper to the Sunnyside corrections officer, and that becomes our word that we have jurisdiction over them and goes along with them, and we don't have to go.
Councilor Benson.
Another benefit, at the beginning, we don't have to pay extra for that. That's just part of their first day's rent. And the bus ticket at the end is also not an additional charge. It's just part of the rate.
Yeah, that is correct.
Right. Any other comments or questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It passes.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you. Any further report from Public Safety Committee?
Not at this time.
Great, thank you. Next committee report is from Community Development. And AB 23-118 is the Wire 2023-0001 Wireless Communication Facilities Permit and Conditional Use Permit Deliberation and Discussion, or Decision, excuse me. Councilor Johnson, would you please read the summary and motion?
4-1 Consulting on behalf of Dish Wireless applied for a wireless communications facility use permit for a proposed wireless facility on the property located at 7917 Center Boulevard in the city. As required by the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, the wireless facility is a stealth facility and is designed to appear as the third story of an existing non-residential building. The application is a Category 3 decision with a hearing examiner recommendation and final decision on the application made by City Council, sitting as a quasi-judicial decision maker. Motion to approve the application of Dish Wireless for a wireless communications facilities permit and conditional use permit, and to adopt the findings, conclusions, and recommendations of the hearing examiner as those of the City Council.
Is there a
Second that
second?
motion.
Did you second? Okay, so motion by Counselor Johnson and second by Counselor Washington. So I will turn this over to City Attorney David Linehan to review the quasi judicial procedures with council.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to walk you through a script that you may have heard before when you had your former city attorney, Mr. Sturbank. I know he used a similar script to this, but it's important that everyone understands that your role tonight is different than your usual legislative role. And so I thought I'd make sure for purposes of everyone's understanding of the process, and also so that we have a clean record, because this is a quasi judicial proceeding. It's important to have a clean record that reflects the proceedings tonight. So bear with me if this takes a little while. Okay, the City Council will now consider an application for a wireless communication facility permit and conditional use permit requested by the applicant, Dish Wireless. The applicant's request is to be allowed to install a stealth structure wireless communications facility on the roof of an existing building located at 7917 Center Boulevard. The proposed facility would be concealed behind architectural features integrated into the existing building. The burden of proof in this proceeding is on the applicant to demonstrate that its proposal is consistent with Snoqualmie Municipal Code, Chapter 17.77, governing wireless communication facilities, the mixed-use zoning standards of SMC Chapter 1730, the requirements for conditional use permit under SMC 17.55.030B, and the general land use performance standards under SMC 17.55.080. The proposal must also be consistent with comprehensive plan objectives and policies, including policy 7.6.6 and objective 9.3. As Councilmember Johnson mentioned a while ago, this is a Category 3 decision under the SMC, and thus the City Council is the ultimate decision maker for this permit, for these permits, following a recommendation from the city's hearing examiner. The city's hearing examiner conducted an open record hearing on September 11th, 2023, and issued her findings, conclusions, and recommendations to the council in a written report dated September 22nd, 2023. So a few words about quasi-judicial procedures and limitations. The council will hear this matter in its quasi-judicial capacity rather than in its legislative or policymaking capacity. What does it mean to say this is a quasi-judicial proceeding or to act in a quasi-judicial capacity? Our courts use that term to describe administrative proceedings that are more like those that occur in a court than they are like legislative proceedings. In the context of city council meetings, a proceeding is quasi-judicial if it involves a situation where the council is acting like a judge, reaching a decision by applying a defined set of legal criteria to the facts, and when the matter involves a specific parcel of land rather than the entire city or entire zoning districts of the city. A quasi-judicial proceeding involves defined parties on either side, like an applicant or a project proponent or opponent, both of whom seek specific decisions that apply to specific property. In the case of the proposed Dish Wireless communications facility, the council's consideration is quasi-judicial because it involves a specific site. The council will be applying a set of defined criteria, the sections of the municipal code, and there are specific parties, the applicant and anyone who testified against the proposal during the hearing examiner's open record hearing. After considering the report from the city's hearing examiner and reviewing the evidence in the record and considering any further arguments of the parties, if any, the city council will deliberate and make a decision to either approve with conditions, or deny the requested permits. Before we proceed further, we need to address the appearance of fairness doctrine. The appearance of fairness doctrine is a rule of law requiring government decision makers to conduct quasi-judicial proceedings like this one in a way that is fair and unbiased, both in appearance and in fact. This doctrine evolved in Washington through judicial opinions and is now codified in state statute. In general, the statute prohibits ex parte or quote off the record communications between decision makers and proponents or opponents of a project. If ex parte conversations occur, the council members must place the substance of that communication on the record, and a public announcement must be made of the content of the communication and of the party's rights to rebut the substance of those communications on the record. For example, if a council member were to run into a constituent at the grocery store and the person began to advocate a position about the Dish Wireless project, that would be an ex parte conversation. Similarly, if a person emails a council member about that project, that would also be an ex parte communication. Absent the disclosure of these, absent the disclosure on the record of such ex parte communications, the remedy for potential violations of the appearance of fairness doctrine is for the decision maker to recuse him or herself. That person should then leave the room and not participate in the proceeding in any way. So to address the appearance of fairness doctrine, I'll now ask council members a series of questions so that any ex parte communications can be disclosed, if any, and so that other matters that may give rise to potential bias or conflicts of interest can be addressed. We will then allow the parties an opportunity to rebut any ex parte communication or object to any council member's participation in the decision based on these disclosures. So, series of questions, and I'm just going to ask for a show of hands if anybody answers or is going to answer in the affirmative. First question, have any of you had ex parte contacts with the applicant, Dish Wireless, or any members of the public regarding this application? I see no hands. Second question, do any of you have a personal financial interest in Dish Network's business? I see no hands. Do any of you have an ownership interest in the site of the proposed wireless communication facility? If so, please raise your hand. I see no hands. Do any of you own property within close proximity of the wireless communication site such that your property will be directly affected, positively or negatively, by the approval or denial of the requested permits? I see no hands. Question? Yes.
Yeah. Just listening to the exact wording of your question. I don't know the distance from this site where improved phone coverage might occur, and therefore I don't know if my property that I own in the city is or is not. And I don't know how to answer that question because I don't have enough information.
So these questions can always be a little bit gray. And so this is really a judgment call. Do you feel that any such interest that you might have in improved cell coverage, would that affect your judgment to be able to impartially rule on the permits at issue tonight?
No.
Okay. So seeing no other hands on this question, do you have any connections to the applicant, Dish Wireless, or its representatives? For example, do you have any family, social, or associational relationships with either the applicant or their attorneys, or any persons who have stated opposition to the project? Seeing no hands. Are any of you employed or have any prospective employment with any of the parties to these proceedings? I see no hands. And lastly, the catch-all, is there any other reason you believe you cannot judge this matter impartially? Okay, I see no hands. So lastly, this is an opportunity for the applicant or any party of record to challenge on appearance of fairness grounds any council member's participation as a decision maker in this matter. If so, please identify yourself and state the reasons for your objection. Nobody online?
Right, we do have, I guess Andrew Levine is our project manager, and then we have Jamo Stephenson is the applicant's representative for Dish Wireless,
But they're presumably not objecting.
but they are not visibly
Okay.
objecting.
All right, very good. Okay, we're near the end, nearing the end here. An additional limitation on this quasi judicial proceeding is that under city code and state statute, there can only be one open record hearing. In this case, the open record hearing was held by the city's hearing examiner on September 11, with evidence and testimony received into the record at that time. For code and state statute, the council's consideration must be based on that record alone, generally with no new evidence admitted. For that reason, the council will not be accepting public comment or testimony on this matter, either as part of its consideration here tonight or during any general public comment portion of this council meeting. All right, so now we will proceed with presentations from Andrew on behalf of the city.
Yes.
And if the applicant wishes to speak, they will be able to go second. I just remind the council that your council rules of procedure technically allow 10 minutes per side in a quasi judicial proceeding, but neither side is required to take that time, and council can extend or shorten that time if deemed appropriate to do so.
Thank you. So we have Andrew Levine, who's the project manager for the city. Andrew, do you wish to speak to this?
Sure, I'll just say a quick word. Good evening, my name's Andrew. I'm a planning consultant working with the city on this application. This application is for a conditional use permit and wireless communication facility permit for a stealth structure atop of an existing commercial building located in the city of Snoqualmie. Just briefly, the facility uses the same colors and materials as the existing building in order to qualify it as a stealth structure. And it is designed to look like the third story of the existing building. Studies provided by the applicant demonstrated that there was a need for additional wireless service capacity in this area and also established why co-location wasn't feasible. Studies also demonstrated that the proposal will be consistent with federal requirements for radio frequency safety. Staff found that the application is consistent with the development standards and requirements for wireless facilities found in the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, and the hearing examiner has recommended that the city council approve the current application for a conditional use permit and wireless communications facility permit. That's all, thank you.
And I believe we have Jamo Stephenson. Yeah. Was it? Oh, okay. So Jamo, you can go ahead and speak to your as the applicant's representative.
Oh, yes. Hi. Sorry. It was just letting me join as a panelist. I don't have any further comment other than the information that was provided, but I am happy to answer any questions that the city council has.
Great, thank you. Councilor, do you have any questions or discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, so we almost talked about this at the Community Development Committee, and then on my way to the meeting, I realized it's be a quasi judicial thing. We're probably not supposed to talk about it until we get to the full council, so we didn't. I do have a question about the materials provided in the Community Development Committee materials. There was a picture that showed what the building would look like once the third floor was installed. First of all, is that part of the record? And second of all, I didn't see it in our packet that we got tonight for the other council members to see. So I wanted to see, did I just miss it? And it's supposed to be in there. And also, should they be able to see it?
Hi, council member. I believe I can answer your question. That is a part of the record. In the recommendation from the hearing examiner, it's listed as Exhibit 8, photo simulations dated May 8th, 2023. I'm not sure I have a way to pull that up for you guys, but they are available as part of those materials if you would like to review.
I think
we can get it from CDC.
Yeah, Emily, are you able to pull that up? Thank you.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Counselor Mayhew and then Counselor Benson.
Ms. Arteche, I just emailed it to you.
Counselor Benson?
Yeah, refresh my memory. What is the height restriction in Snoqualmie on buildings?
Paragraph 6, it said it's 45.
So in 6, I saw finding 6, which spoke to the height of this building.
Sorry.
But I was asking if, just to refresh my memory on what the limit was, because according to this one, the building's going to go to 45 feet, 4 inches. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yes, 45 feet, 4 inches.
And I can't remember what our limit was in the city of Snoqualmie.
As I recall in the staff report, the code requires a maximum of 3 stories. Or 40. I would have to pull up that information for you. I'm sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head.
And then,
4 stories.
okay, well, maybe we can figure out the answer to that one. The other question I had, it said that it said something about a 15-foot antenna. Would that be, that wouldn't be in addition to the 3rd story? What is that part of the 3rd story, or would that be another 15 feet on top of the 45-foot 4-inch roof?
So I pulled up Exhibit 8 from the hearing examiner's report. If you guys can see that on your screens.
Yes, we can.
So on the left, you have the existing condition here. And then on the right, you've got what would be proposed. And so that enclosure, that false third story, includes the 15-foot antenna. The 15-foot height limit is from the top of the existing building, and it's specifically related to rooftop mounted wireless facilities. This stealth structure is within that limit. So here's the other various renderings that were provided by the applicant as part of their application that are also found in hearing examiner's materials. This is, the left shows the existing condition, the right shows the proposed condition.
Councilor Washington?
Yeah, so just below, it does read the height would be consistent with the 4-story height limit with MU zone. So I don't know what that would translate into in terms of feet, 4 stories.
Yeah, I believe there was not a height limitation specified by the municipal code, but rather just the 4-story limit. And even so, that is a building height limit, and this height limit as a rooftop mounted wireless facility is governed by the wireless facilities code of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. So it's not quite the same limitation.
That's a new one for me.
Councilor Benson?
I am pretty sure that I've heard that there's a height limit on buildings several dozen times in the past, and am I going crazy, or is there actually am I remembering that wrong? Is there not a height limit on buildings?
So each zone implements a height limit for buildings within that zone. The MU zone, which is where this application is located, is a little bit unique because the height limits are kind of intended to be fleshed out by an approved mixed-use final plan. And so this application occurs within Snoqualmie Ridge 1, and it did not specify a height limit in feet for wireless facilities or and I'm not positive if it specifies a building height limit either, but the most relevant fact is that it doesn't specify it. It doesn't speak to wireless facilities at all, which is why it's being governed by the wireless facilities code portion of the municipal code.
So then,
Councilor Vincent?
so then the city's got building height limits that change from zone to zone. And wireless facilities can be any height. They can reach to the stratosphere. There's not a limit.
The limits for wireless facilities are implemented through the wireless facilities code. So there are height limits. It's just in terms of like a building, when you're talking about building stories, a 4-story height limit, there's not really any part of the MU zone that would implement a height limit on a wireless facility in the city. But that height limit would be governed by the wireless facilities code. It's kind of two separate sets of regulation.
Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, so I'm getting more and more confused with each answer. Let me try and sidestep to what I originally thought the answer was when I read the record. I thought that that the hearing examiner stated, what's that section number? 6. In section 6, this is one of the first things I looked for when I reviewed this, that the height of that additional thing that's being added, appurtenance, anyway, that height is, if it were part of the building, which I don't quite understand how it isn't, but it's within the height limit permitted for that location, so that we don't need to look beyond, so that even if there was some other code that might purport to allow a higher height, that doesn't come into play here anyway, because this is clearly permitted within the height restriction for that zone. Is what I just said a correct understanding, or am I oversimplifying? And in fact, we need to look to some other guidance such as utility height items.
I believe what you're stating is supported by the hearing examiner's record. So yes, to answer your question.
Okay, so, and just to make sure I'm clear on this, so we don't need to look to wireless height limits. We can simply look to the building permitted height. And the hearing examiner looked at that question and concluded that this is within the permitted height. I think I just restated it. Did I state that correctly?
That's my understanding. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
So, guess paragraph 7, the applicant identified a service area to be covered and made arguments that this was the best location, citing that a location halfway down the hill on a power tower was inappropriate. My question is about, go the other part up the hill, Ginny Hansen Park is inappropriate. I mean, just because we had discussions about light leakage from Ginny Hansen Park and the lights there, why was it the discussion downhill from this location versus both uphill and downhill for appropriate geographic coverage?
Is that part of the record though?
I don't know. I'm not sure I can speak to the technical reasoning behind that. There was studies performed as part of this application that are required by the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. This exhibit that I pulled up on screen is Exhibit 13 of the hearing examiner's report. It shows what you're looking at here is the various coverage of various existing coverage. And this red circle is where the proposed service area is. So the applicant used this study in their presentation to or in their application, which was reviewed by the hearing examiner to demonstrate and justify the location of their facility, their proposed facility.
And the applicant is present. Can I hear from the applicant if they looked at locations further up the hill?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Yeah, we looked at various options, but the problem that we saw with the PCE poles was for the ground equipment. This was a long time ago that this was done. So just off the top of my head, I believe that because of the code, ground equipment couldn't be installed at the PCE tower areas.
Agreed. My question is the PCA towers, I believe, are down the hill from this location. So I would assume that's not a good location just to begin with. I can tell you my cell service from the PCA tower, I can see it's not that great, but that's not material. My real question is, were there locations uphill from this that may give you a broader coverage reviewed as part of this, or were deemed as inappropriate or not safe?
Yes, there were various other PCE poles that were analyzed. Yes.
Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
So it was approved by 6 and with Mayor Pro Tem Holloway voting no. Okay. Any other community development, community development report? Councilor
No
Johnson.
further report.
Next report is Parks and Public Works, AB 23-110 Eagle Lake Water Reclamation Basin Improvements Amendment to RH2 Services Agreement. Councilor Benson, would you please read the summary and motion?
I will. Hold on just a sec. I just need to scroll to it. I apologize. I know, but my eyes don't go that far. All right. This agenda bill seeks to amend the existing service agreement with RH2 Engineering to design and permit a new reclaimed water reservoir and update the reclaimed water system plan. City produces and distributes Class A reclaimed water during dry season months for reuse as irrigation supply. The reclaimed water improvement project will upgrade the dated reclaimed water distribution system and bring it into compliance with the Department of Ecology mandated reclaimed water rule. Move to approve an amendment to the Eagle Lake Water Reclamation Basin Improvement Services Agreement with RH2 Engineering.
I second.
This has been moved by Councilor Benson, second by Councilor Washington. Is there any public comment regarding this item on the agenda? I'm looking online to see if anyone's raising their hand. I'm not seeing anyone, as well as in City Hall. So we do have project engineer Andrew Vining. You can provide information. Would you like to hear information from him, or does anyone want to start any discussion? Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, maybe I'll ask questions first because it might help guide the discussion. But so this is this topic, something that's been on the city's list for several years. My recollection of the last time it came in front of the council is that we were very concerned about the cost, and it appeared that using reclaimed water was now going to be more expensive than using just water from the river. is where water normally comes from. And that didn't seem to make any sense. And it sort of seemed to die then. That's my recollection. I don't know if that's correct, but it just raises the question in my mind of, well, is it in fact more expensive to do this than to just use potable water? So as I kind of thought that question through, and I looked at the materials here, I went to this City of Snoqualmie Reclaimed Water Distribution System Engineering Report that's attached. And on page 5, it talks 4 and 5, it talks about an analysis of alternatives. And one of those alternatives is using potable water. But this analysis is fairly brief and concludes that it would be more expensive to use potable water because the current rates being charged, rates that this council sets, would cause the would cause the golf course to have to pay a higher amount. But it didn't address, so that's pricing. But so it didn't address the question of cost to the city at all. So how we charge out is something we can change. If we discover there's something wrong in our rate schedule, we can change that rate schedule to fix it. The question in my mind is it more costly to the city to use potable water or to do this proposal? And I didn't see the answer to that here. And I think that's my recollection is that was the key question before. And it certainly seems like the key question now. And as I kind of thought that through, using the information that's here, it appears that the idea is we're going to incur these costs now, meaning they're paid for by all ratepayers in order to benefit one specific ratepayer, the golf course. No. And so my concern is that what we're doing? And is that we want? I got just a little more confused because I started to think about the mill site addition. And we were told when we were going through that process that there was plenty of water for the mill site to be added. Yet here on page 5, it says we might run out of water by 2040. And if we did this maybe earlier, so some need 17 years in the future. It all just, I can't sort of get a picture here of what's the least costly method of doing this. And do we really need to, and if we're just worried about water 17 years from now, do we really need to incur these costs now? Or would that be something that we'd take into account 17 years from now when we're doing whatever it is that would cause that increased water usage, and we'd expect that developer therefore to bear those costs rather than our current ratepayers? So I've got sort of some other nuances to this, but big picture, my question is the cost to the city and therefore to the current ratepayers, is this the least expensive way forward, or would it be better to use the potable water? Would that be less expensive? So I'm trying to get at what is the cost of the city, which we then have to pass on to the ratepayers? And are we sending to we can adjust that to the right ratepayer. So just what are those cost differences? And I just didn't see that.
Okay, let's hear from our project engineer, Andrew Vining.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. That's something that you saw it was considered in the engineering report evaluation as the alternative. Just one note, there's multiple reclaimed water customers that we have, and this project actually is not aimed at the golf course supplement of water. They would still be using the Eagle Lake Reservoir for theirs. This project aims at the city's reclaimed water distribution system, which feeds a number of customers. It includes the business park, multiple city right-of-ways, city parks, and and portions of the Ridge Association. And that water on average, that's 18 million gallons of water a year that is used. That is, and that amount of water is used during irrigation season. So that's when water's demand is the highest, instantaneous water demand is the highest. So kind of talking about water and that I think long-term, the city is looking to protect those water rights. And if we were to switch to potable, that would be a bigger demand, 18 million gallons of water annually on our potable water. And that demand would come when demand in the city is the highest during the irrigation season and when water supplies would be most taxed as well. So, if we were to go that route, we would be more at risk of having, water conservation efforts. Our water use efficiency program includes use of reclaimed water. So we've made those commitments in other reports. That's probably the best answer I've got. Jeff Hamlin, city engineer, is here, and he's actually involved in a lot of the water rights and water resource projects we have.
Hi. So to answer your question directly, in the long run, it will cost us a lot more to use potable water for irrigation than it would to use the reclaimed water. The reclaimed water system is already established. You're correct about the rates. We can set the rates, and we need to set the rates. We need to look at the rates, and we're beginning a utility rate study now, and we're going to add in the reclaimed water facilities within the utility rate study, so we can revisit those and pay proper, how much we collect in a proper amount of money to fund that. But we are nearing the end of our water source. We have enough water to pay or to cover phase 1 of the mill site development, plus a little more. Phases 2 and phase 3 are not clear yet on how much water they're expecting. But from what we have seen from the initial proposals, we are not likely to have enough water to supply that. So if we were to convert our portion of the reclaimed water system that we use to irrigate city facilities, that would be $18 million out of our water budget that gets diverted to irrigation and is no longer available for the city to use for other developments, other initiatives that we want to move forward. So now it's not just a matter of money either, because we are coming to a point where water is now more of a commodity than ever. And there just plain is not any more water out there to buy, right? There are no more water rights. You can't go buy water rights from anybody because there's nobody selling them. And the basin was fully allocated, and they're not going to release any more water rights to anybody. So the price on water is going up. We have limitations on how much water. We have an instantaneous limit and we have an annual limit. And so we have to stay within each of those. In the summer months, that's where we're most taxed. So we need to do several things. One, maintain our reclaimed water, the water system. That water is water that we just turn out into the river otherwise, right? So this is a free water. It's not free, but it's essentially a free water source. This water that we would otherwise have to replace with potable water. So we are better off to maintain that resource now for irrigation. And we need to try to get more water. That is what the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project is all about, to try to get more. And that could be up to 40 acre feet or so additional, but that's about, that's kind of as much as we're going to be able to find without going out and paying real big money to get more water to grow in the future.
Ask follow.
Yes.
So I'm just zeroing in on what you said. So when we look at this coming rate study, we could isolate the costs of running the reclaimed water irrigation system.
Yes.
And we could consider whether we wanted to set rates for that water different from other water.
Yes.
And so if it was our desire to match those costs with the particular users, we could do that through the rate schedule. We could cause that outcome.
That's correct.
All right. And do you know, generally speaking, a gallon of reclaimed water versus a gallon of potable water? I know it probably depends during the year, but roughly, are they the same or is one higher than the other?
Oh, potable water is much more expensive. Rates set for reclaimed were set back when we developed the reclaimed water system and have not been adjusted since. And they are undervalued. And so
Okay.
we're not charging enough for it.
Not charging enough, but I'm asking the cost of running it.
The cost of running it. Yes, we do have the cost of, we have been able to determine the cost of running it just through our records, our cost records. And that is something that we want to do with the rate study, is to take that cost of running it and pay for it with our rates.
Okay. So that's something we could look at in the coming rate study and rate setting process that comes out of it.
That's what we intend to do.
And you intend to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
So clarification, irrigation rates were part of previous rate studies. I participated in them. For the most part, the rates are set so that the cost of operations of that service is passed on to the consumers of that service, kind of a zero-sum game. There's some tweaking in between, and there was some tweaking on irrigation to actually encourage irrigation use versus potable water use in that prior irrigation study some time ago, 4 years ago, thereabouts. I'm sorry, but it wasn't just set when we put the facility in. There has been subsequent reviews of the irrigation facility rate and some tweaking to actually encourage it, because it is a cheaper source of water for us than having them switch over to potable.
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I remember that now. Now that you called that out, I remember discussing that at the time. So the thing then that I encourage us to do, since this is what we're talking about tonight, is a great big $3 million capital cost, maybe higher. That's on page 3 of the agenda bill. So I would encourage us, when we look at the costs, that we include the capital costs, not just the operating costs, to make sure we're really, we're really trying to isolate the costs of that system from the costs of the potable water system. And then, look, we can always make a decision, as you mentioned, as the other council member mentioned, to underprice that to encourage its use, fine, but we need to know the cost in the first place. And if we could have both the operating and the capital costs as part of that analysis, then I think we're in a position to make those decisions. Does that seem
That is what
something
we
we could do?
intended to do. Yeah, because, we're facing this cost, these capital costs now to build the reservoir. So we need to pay for it. And, we want to include that.
If I could just say, Mayor, but one of the frustrations at the time this came up previously, to my recollection, is the state is imposing new, more onerous and much more expensive requirements onto these reclaimed water systems. And that's a real challenge. We have to figure out how to fund those requirements, and then we have to get the ratepayers to pay them. It's frustrating, but that's why I'm sort of zeroed in on this, but it sounds, thank you for answering my questions.
Councilor Benson.
Yeah, so there's a short-term question of how do we pay for this? And so if you could just speak really quickly to the pressure reducing valve station project that we're deferring in order to do this. But then there's the long-term suggestion that we're working on paying for this long-term by adjusting the way that we charge for this water. And you're looking at both what it costs to run and what it costs to build, and making that up there. But short term, we need to put off
The PRV stations.
Yeah.
Correct. So we are sliding back. Part of the way we're paying for this study is to slide back 3 PRV stations. When we developed our CIP, we had several PRV station, pressure zone adjustments, what we call pressure zone adjustments. The city has multiple pressure zones, and it's endless tweaking with those things to try to get it, to find they all have to operate in a fairly narrow pressure band. So there's lots of little tweaks to be made on a fairly continuous basis, because you change one thing and it changes other things, right? So we have multiple PRV station tweaks to make. When we developed the CIP budget with Drew, he lumped a bunch of them together. We talked about it. He said, how about if we just lump a lot of these into one PRV project? And we're like, that sounds good. We can do that. That's usually a less expensive way to do it. Similar contract, less mobilization, and all that. So there's efficiencies in doing that. That is not a time critical project for us. We can slide that back. It's not going to affect anything. We had it in our schedule because it fit in the schedule to do it that way, right? So a lot of times, we have critical things that have to get done on a timeline, and then there's a lot of other stuff that's not critical to a timeline. And so as we figure out how we're going to spend money over 20 years, we're trying to keep a fairly consistent budget year to year, and so we can slide those things around. And that's why that PRV was slated for next year, and it won't hurt us to move it back 1 year.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, another question was, that came up at Parks and Public Works, was about where the extra funding was going to come from, the 50,000. And we did hear back from Mr. Vining about how we have apparently 19 million or so in our reserves for the utilities capital fund, and our reserve target is 4.5 million. So we'd be cutting into that by about 0.25%. So
Is it
quarter of a
is
percent.
that our fund balance?
It's fund balance.
Fund balance, not
19 is fund
reserves.
balance, not
Yes,
reserve.
that.
Yeah, right. So the fund
Right.
balance is money that we have not spent yet,
Right.
right? But we'll spend it down to the reserve. We don't want to dig into the
Exactly.
reserve if we can help.
So point being that this isn't a critical expenditure out of it. It's not zero, but we do have a pretty healthy fund balance there compared to our reserve. Yeah, so I want to put that out.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
So, and that's why I held this off consent, or asked for it to be held off consent. In the statement of accelerating, what was it? Acceleration of project budget in the current biennium is not satisfying for me. Okay, there's something in the next biennium that is not going to get done to free up this $50,000. Accelerating it doesn't generate new money. It's still that money, and I'm looking for what are we giving up to bring this $50,000 forward? We have 19,000, but we have a CIP project which pretty much commits all of that in some way or form. So it's not a big sum. I'm not recommending we say no because of that. I'm just saying I'm not satisfied with an answer of accelerating $50,000. The real answer should be, and something else is not going to be done in next biennium, and that frees up additional funds to cover this. Okay. Having an unsatisfactory answer, I couldn't go consent. I appreciate the answer that you quoted from email, but still leaves me in the same condition.
Councilor Benson?
Yeah, I just really quickly, if somebody can explain, we have about $4.5 million as reserve for this fund. What is the point of that reserve, if not to dip into that when we need $49,000 more? What is, I don't fully understand what the point of the reserve is if we don't occasionally use it when we need it. And I'd love to hear a good answer to that.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, for me, I would be thinking about when we're talking about that number, the 4.5 million or so, I'm thinking about kind of a rainy day fund when bad things happen and we're not getting any help from anyone and we need to cover something extra. If it's something that is relative to that amount is relatively small, then it doesn't bother me too much. But if let's say that we're dipping into this $1 million to fund this project, then I become much more concerned about that's not really the proper use of a reserve. But that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Councillor Mayhew.
Yeah, so two thoughts. First off, the fastest way to bankrupt the city is to make decisions on how much is in fund balance. Because there is always money in fund balance. That's the nature of how things work. Money comes in and then you spend it. There's always money in fund balance. We went through a very, let me say that differently. We go through a very careful biennial budgeting process where we account for every single dollar of fund balance, every single dollar. And one of the things we do, to the reserve question, I think Councilmember Johnson just touched on this as well, is we allow for something to happen that requires immediate funding. We make sure we have some funding for that. For example, it's actually a bad example, but for example, just a few years ago, we had our water system source wiped out. It took $1 million to get the river water back online. And now it's a bad example because actually it's a good example because this is a utility fund. So it had to come out of the utility fund emergency reserve. Think of it as an emergency reserve. So the reserve is not to pick into. You trust me, pick a little here, pick a little there, and it's gone. Because how are you going to get it back? So pick the right number. If we think 4 million is the wrong number to have in reserves, well, let's address that by changing the reserve. But the important thing here is our CIP is not underfunded by 50,000 or even by a little bit. It's underfunded by somewhere between, I think, $20 million. We have projects approved with no funding. If you all remember, we put some projects in green, some in yellow, some in, I think, red. We said these projects we'll only go forward with if we can find some outside funding. We have the biggest project on there, which is the community center expansion. It's $15 million short. We don't have any funding for that. So it's all coming from the same source. We only have a few revenue sources. So I think Councilmember Holloway is dead right. There's this $49,000. Granted, it's a small amount in comparison to this or all of our projects. It in and of itself doesn't give me much heartburn. We'll find the 49,000 without much effort. But the notion that we would move forward without having specified that now, I think is a horrible move. We must not make that mistake. So the other thing is, remember this, to change our appropriation outside of the mid biennium review requires a supermajority, not a majority, a supermajority. We should not pass, in my view, any agenda bill with funding that's not in our appropriation unless we simultaneously adjust the appropriation. Because we should not, by majority vote, do something that requires funding that can only be done by supermajority vote. We should not ever do that. So, and then more importantly, just here we've got something that lays out, here's the source. There's sources here of, I think, $400,000 that have been identified, give or take. Where's the budget amendment? Well, we're going to pull it from here, we're going to pull it from there, and we're going to pull it from there, and then we're going to have 49,000 left to go. Okay, fine. We got a good answer, I thought, to the question of why these pressure valves can, but where's the budget amendment that takes those pressure valves out? And I'd like to know, where are they going in? Let's have that budget amendment now and pass it at the same time we pass this. Otherwise, it's just horrible budget process. And frankly, we're doing something that we actually, that requires a supermajority vote to fund, and we should never do that without making sure we have that supermajority funding.
So Councilor Watton and then Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Thank you, Mayor. And this question goes over to Mr. Hamlin because he's the expert when it comes to water, and I know very little bit about this, but on the agenda bill, it states that the larger reservoir size is necessary to provide reliable service. To me, that means there is either a risk that it's going to break down or that it is not sufficient enough to cover changes in the state laws or regulations around this. And connected with it, when there is an emergency, does it cost us overtime that we didn't expect or budget in? I mean, I'm looking at, sometimes you save a few pennies and you end up spending dollars. And that would be my greater concern. I'm not an expert in this, and I appreciate any enlightenment.
So yeah, the size of the reservoir was selected because of how we operate irrigation. So we irrigate more when it's hotter, right? So there are certain times, sometimes, certain weeks out of the summer where we end up using a lot more water. This is all controlled through sensors and computer, right? So we have a weather station, we have moisture sensors, we have, equipment in the field which informs our system on how much to irrigate. So we do have periods where we have to, what is the 300,000 gallons? I mean, there's some. Yeah, go ahead. Andrew actually has this a little bit of an idea.
Part of the engineering report was to look at the peak day demands, and we need to meet that. And then you want to have a safety factor. When someone turns on their faucet and they expect, or even their irrigation line, you expect water to come out. If water doesn't come out, you have a system resiliency issue at hand. So there's some additional volume in the reservoir so that in case of, the not able to produce reclaimed water, something at the treatment plants offline, it gives our operators about a day to adjust their operations. Maybe we have to use potable for that window, but water is still going to be coming out of that tap. And the size of the reservoir was determined to provide that resiliency factor. So that's all discussed in the kind of the engineering report sizing.
And then to answer your question regarding the overtime, it's more equipment. It is another facility, but it is a reservoir facility, so it doesn't actually pump. There's no real activity that needs to be addressed at the end of the year. We'll probably clean the thing out or kind of flush it, and those the normal startup and shut down for the season. So it's likely to contribute a little bit more in the way of labor, but I don't see this as being something that's going to create emergency situations the way mechanical equipment will.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
One, let's keep track. This is the state mandates coming to us that we cannot in public land, open spaces, do I'm going to call it untreated, but you may call it reclaimed water for certain class, but untreated water used for irrigation. Okay. So that's why you see Eagle Lake can still go to the golf club because they're not public land, they're private land. Okay. But for the rest of it, the parkway, the parks, fairway, whatever, that's got to have protected reclaimed water. And that's what this activity will do. Okay. But to address your problem, I agreed. I'm unsatisfied with the logic behind the 49. I do not believe, well, that's one. I think that point's been made. Two, I don't want to deny staff some leeway in managing the CIP projects and working those around within the appropriate budget that we have allocated, the appropriation. Okay. So I don't think that every action requires a revote on the CIP except in our annual review. Okay. Having said that, and considering this is $59,000 or $49,000, I don't think we should stop on it. We've got a state mandate to go chase after and go do. I do agree that when we start to move things between the bienniums, we should be aware when we're making the vote. Staff's practice has been kind of to work those up to a meaningful chunk and then bring it. Otherwise, almost every agenda bill we've got to vote an amendment to. I'm not sure that we should at this moment change that practice. We should probably have a discussion on that practice before we do a change on it. So I think we ought to move forward with this tonight. Be aware there's a 49,000 gimme somewhere in here that at some stage we're going to have to deal with. More likely in discussions of the CIP at future state and in discussions of the biennial budgets between now and next biennial.
Councilor Benson.
I hear what you're saying. I think I disagree, though. I think that they've really done all the work for the budget amendment, right? They've already worked out the math. It's just an opportunity for us to lay it out. The picking away at the fund reserves is a real concern, because if we do, find ourselves saying, oh, this is just $49,000 or this is just $75,000, eventually it turns into real money.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like in the materials we provided, we've got all the stuff that we would need for a budget amendment. So it doesn't seem to me that voting on a budget amendment as well would create idea. And I've never written a budget amendment, so I'm talking out of my hat. But it seems like they've done most of the work for that. So the idea of best practices and the fact that we really would need a supermajority without that seems like, why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that whenever this kind of thing comes up?
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I would wonder if getting this project started is not time critical, if we could wait 2 weeks to have a budget amendment and this is a companion bill, if we could do that. So basically send this back to committee, bring those as two things. If it's already basically all been laid out here, we just don't have that separate budget amendment. I would be curious if that would be a problem.
It does require an ordinance, and so it would be 2 readings.
Okay, so 2 readings.
So it'd be a month.
There's a cost.
Oh,
There's a cost to it.
Every ordinance has a cost
Yes, and it takes a while.
and a publish.
okay. you have to
Publish everything else.
Well,
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, just trying to think to this point. I just would make the point, go pick your city, go pick Issaquah, go pick any city you want. Budget amendments happen all the time. They're not saved up and done once a year. We're very much not the norm in that. And it's, I think, a horrible practice. Having said that, I think I'm just trying to think through sort of the argument that was made, which is, okay, they didn't just, by the way, they didn't ask for 49,000, they asked for over 400,000. So let's get the number right. But still, in a CIP that's got 40 or 50 million over 6 years, even 400,000 is not a big portion of that. So I think the point's well made. But I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. I think I think that approving a project while these other projects that we're going to take the money from are still approved puts us in a situation where we've approved $400,000 of appropriation that we just don't have source to cover. And I think we should take away from the one at the same time we're putting in the other. So is this work that needs to start in the next month? And by the way, if it is, so I don't have to come back and make the point later, if this work needs to start in the last month, this should have been in front of us 3 months ago. 3 months ago. So I am sort of tired of you have to pass it tonight because we've waited till the last minute. That practice has to stop. And I'm willing to vote on this. Well, I'm not. I'm okay with this. I'm willing to vote yes on this project. That's not my issue. The only issue you satisfied my questions on whether to do the project. I think that sounds great. I just don't like what did one of our formal council members call it, the hygiene around this. The financial hygiene is terribly important, I think. So I would rather see the budget amendment come through and do it at the same time, unless it's really true that we're gonna screw ourselves on costs or timing if we don't approve it tonight, in which case maybe I'd go along with, okay, then let's go through with it, but I expect a budget amendment within, the next 2 council meetings to get this done.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Well, and forgive me, I'm not sure if those other ones aren't within existing allocations or not. So there's maybe that discussion to go on too. But, so I guess my compromise proposal is we move forward with this, but we take the FNA and let's have a discussion in FNA of how do we want to do these changes requiring budget amendment moving forward. And I'm not sure this 49,000 is the only one. So I guess I'm asking administration, are there other outstanding budget amendments that we ought to be looking at this stage? I mean, I just don't want to pick this one jaywalker. Now that we've decided jaywalking is a significant issue, okay, there may be others. Let's go look at the whole thing and decide how we're going to do this, whether we do monthly, quarterly, or upon agenda bill, how we move forward with doing these budget amendments. And I think that's how we can close this, move this forward, still close out the issue of the hygiene issue and move forward with it, if you guys are okay with that.
Councilor Benson.
Yeah, my concern though is, and I don't believe that city staff would do this, but what is the legal prevention from them doing this and also doing the other work that we already approved? The pressure valve, just, for what keeps them from doing that if we haven't made the budget amendment? That's my only concern. And again, I don't think that they're going to do this. I don't think that they're, tenting their fingers and saying, "Oh, this is how we get to do." That's not what. But from the standpoint of, as you put it, what kind of hygiene? I'm not good at hygiene. So yeah. What is the prevention? What is the legal prevention from that?
I mean, we're going through approval on this project, right?
We already approved the other one, right? Didn't
You
we?
would see those would probably come through as well.
No, wait.
To council.
So we approved an allocation for utility CIP projects.
Right.
They are appropriately working within that allocation to fit this in by saying another project is going to slide.
Right.
We didn't approve each individual project into the biennial amount that they will go.
Okay.
We approved the CIP. Correct me if I'm wrong. Drew's not here.
You're correct.
Okay.
You're correct.
Miss Drew. So he's appropriately managing within the allocation to offset some of this, to say the PRV goes out to make room for this.
Right.
Okay. He's appropriately working within his utility operation funds to say, I've got some of this. You're kind of transferring between appropriations to that stage, but I'm taking operational funds to pay for the capital thing. I have funds available within operation to do that. That probably should be a budget amendment, but I think that's paperwork to cover what we're doing. I don't think there's question of whether or not it exists. We can probably go do that pretty easily. Okay, so they're doing that. It's the 49,000 where we're shifting from biennial to biennial without any backdrop of what makes that $49,000 available. Again, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, maybe not this long of a conversation, but I wanted us to have this conversation in regards to that, to particularly talk about that hygiene issue. And I think we can take that to FNA and have a discussion and come up with a solution.
Sounds good. Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, so I think I'm willing to go along with that. I think I'm still, I think I don't think that city employees would intentionally overspend. By the way, there are multiple ways to do budgets that are permissible under state law. And in some ways, doing it differently than we do it might be better, because the thing about that CIP is you get to the end of the 2-year appropriation, and for all those projects that are underway, with an exception for stuff that's already been spent and just we haven't received a bill on, but with the exception of that, we have to renew the appropriation, right? Because it's gone now. There's other ways where you actually appropriate to cover individual projects. And then that can survive for multiple years. So I'm not suggesting we change. I'm just saying there's various ways to do it. But the thing is, the way we're doing it is a trust by this council that the items on the CIP are in fact the items that will be worked on. And to my knowledge, staff has not violated that trust. So that's fine with me. And I think about what Councilmember Holloway just proposed. He's basically saying, okay, let's clean up our process a bit to make, because either the budget means something or it doesn't. And I think it does. So let's keep it clean. Let's adjust it when we change things. But can we trust staff to come back to us with a revised budget? I think I agree we can. And so I'm willing to vote yes for this, with the understanding that we'll take this up further in FNA to discuss what this process should be going forward.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, it passes. So we have approved the Eagle Lake Water Reclamation Basin Improvements Amendment. Is there any further public works comments or committee report?
Nothing for me.
Right. Next item is Finance Administration. We'll start with the AB 23-112 Meadowbrook Farm Governance ILA. Mayor Pro Tem Holly, would you please read the summary and motion?
Purpose of the interlocal agreement is to set forth the terms and conditions under which Meadowbrook Farm will be governed and managed by the cities of Snoqualmie and North Bend in order to preserve the farm as a public open space consistent with all applicable restrictions set forth in the deeds. And I'll let somebody else read the rest of that. We'll go to move to adopt resolution number 1669, approving the interlocal agreement between Snoqualmie and North Bend for the governance and management of Meadowbrook Farm, and authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Washington. Is there any public comment regarding this item? We'll look online. Not seeing anyone raise their hands, or in City Hall. Okay, not seeing anyone raise their hands. So, Councilor, is there any discussion, or would you like to hear from our Community Development Director, Emily Arteche, regarding the ILA? So we had Councilor Watton and then Councilor Mayhew.
Thank you, Mayor. The last few months, I've been part of the advisory group as the council liaison. And I think that this is an important ILA, the one that has already expired, that we're still operating under, is a 25-year agreement. This one is going to be a 10-year agreement, but there's some concerns to the way that this is structured. First of all, each of the cities have had representatives on there, and a couple significant things came up this year that only happened because of council representation that would have been missed otherwise. The first one was that the association, which is now the governing body, spent $7,500 a year on elk brochures on the Washington State ferries. And Mayor Pro Tem Colin and I both disagree that that's a good way of spending money. And it's also that ecotourism that doesn't generate a lot of income for the city, as well as it kind of is incongruent to the beliefs of the Snoqualmie tribe. So with that in mind, there are two amendments that I think that are important. One is that the governing body that will oversee everything right now, as it's proposed, is only being conducted by the two mayors, and they do not reflect the council's perspective. And for those of us on the council, we bring a lot of personal knowledge in the community. And I think it would be appropriate to do this, and that is have the two mayors serve as alternating chair and vice chair, so that we have consistency. But by having two other council members from each of the council will give us the ability of group knowledge that we might lose if we're not involved. And I think that's important. The other thing was on elk management. This was another thing that came forward thanks to Mayor Pro Tem Colin and I, and that is the Elk Management Association that deals with the herd. There hasn't been included in the past, and nor has the tribe been consulted on the management of elk, which were at one time prevalent in the valley and reintroduced in about 1970. So I think that it's important that we bring as many perspectives to the forefront. So my proposal is that we designate two council representatives for each of the cities, have the mayors alternate as the chair, and then that would eliminate the need for appointing a designee to serve in the absence or unavailability of the mayor. The second part, and this is really important because there's an advisory body, and the advisory body is made up of a lot of different groups, and that's where we had the connection with what was happening with the management, the day-to-day management. My recommendation is that each of the councils appoint a liaison and an alternate liaison. We've never really codified this in the past. And whereas we've had myself, prior to me was Councilmember Johnson, was the only appointee, but over on the North Bend side, they've had two liaisons so that they can stay in the loop. And we're a non-voting member of that body. So that would be my recommendation, is we can either correct it tonight, do a couple of amendments, or send it back for further consultation.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, and then I would like to speak to it as well.
Okay. So one of the suppositions there is that the mayor does not represent the interests of the people, nor is aware of the sentiment of the republic or the public. I disagree with that statement. Two, I do not believe that the farm takes priority over other liaison responsibilities we as a council have. And tell you the truth, we've never donated two council members to hospital, school district, watershed, pick one you want. So I think having two representatives from council is overloading this particular activity. And more importantly, putting a priority emphasis on it above and beyond other things, that if we want to up our representation, I would up our representation in other areas instead of this. Third, any council member who wants to, I'm not suggesting we take the liaison position away. I think that is a good position to have. The farm is important. And other than that, with the exception of getting a quorum there, any council member who wants to go to these meetings, they are public meetings and public notice, can attend. Okay, so I hear you, but I don't understand them as arguments against the governance structure as presented, nor needing revision.
So if I can explain, because I'm the one that worked on this for the past year. So the governing, so this is the new structure. So you, I don't know if you could see it really well, but so obviously the city of Snoqualmie and North Bend, we've been partners for the last 25 years on this, and it just expired end of May. And so we set it up differently because we have been having the Farm Preservation Association has been the one basically running it. I mean, you have people that have been on the board for 20 plus years, going up mowing and all this stuff. And so that is a nonprofit group. So they're over to the left and they're just going to do docent, educational, interactive activities at the farm. So we have a governing body that is made up of both mayors, and basically it's the governing body is an extension of administrative duties of the mayors to manage the Meadowbrook according to policies and budgets that are approved by council. So anything that happens to the master plan or the budget or any other policies has to go through council for approval. Then you have the advisory board, and I'm very unclear about your comment about the elk management group because it's actually part of it. So it would
Now
include.
it is. Now
Oh,
it
it's
is.
been on here. Yeah, it's been on here for like a couple months. We reached
Because
out
of
to them
our
and asked them.
insistence.
Okay, thank you. So they are included. So Upper Snoqualmie Valley Elk Management Group and represented from the tribe. And basically the advisory board is more of a staff type function. So we would have our CD director, Emily Artechet, as well as similar role from North Bend would be on that. And their main function is to gain insight from non-city interested parties, such as the tribe, the school district. You would have one representative from the association, King County, et cetera. And so everyone's putting together the information and, coming up with the management and operations plan, and all this information then rolls up to the governing body. And then we also have what would approve a little bit is the contract for maintenance and operations, which is over on the right-hand side. So you can have a council liaison, but it would be similar to like attending a Northwest Railway meeting, right? We're not in their bylaws. I don't think you want to assign 2 council members to the governing body, because now you're taking on a whole nother role. And I can show you the liaison list that you guys already have going on. And not everyone has time to attend all of these meetings. And so, I don't see having another council members on there as a necessary for the governing body. But Councilor Mayhew.
So I've got 2 concerns and one minor little thing that I want to put out because I think they sort of interplay with this discussion, perhaps. I'll just do the little thing. If someone wants to take a note, in section 5.1, the period 10 years of the period, which I think is fine, would actually have this agreement end halfway through a biennium. And I think that is a really bad idea because it's much better if it ends with the biennium end. And so I think it says actually it's middle of the year, May of 2033. I think that ought to be changed to December 31st of 2034 or 2032, one of those. I'm fine with it being 2034, 11 years, but or 10 and a half, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, just I think otherwise we're going to create a real headache for ourselves in budgeting. That's the minor thing. In 6.31, it talks about how the budget will come to exist. And if I'm understanding this correctly, it's saying that 2 people, the mayor of Snoqualmie and the mayor of North Bend, will get together and come up with a budget. It does require that that doesn't become effective until each members, city council has approved it, so I think that's fantastic. The part that I'm troubled with is, first is just the use of the word shall. And for those people who are attorneys in the room, you probably know why I'm worried. It says the member cities shall approve the budget by no later than a date that's specified here. The concern I have is, well, what if they don't? So the use of the word shall has me troubled. But then lower down, what it says, if the members disagree as to the budget or the relative contribution due from each member, there's a process by which you add in one person from each city council. There's a further discussion. If they can't agree, then there's a mediation process that's initiated. I think that's a really bad idea. I think that this council is responsible for the budget of this city, and we should not turn that budget authority over to anyone. In fact, I wonder if that's even legal, but never mind. I don't think we should do it. So I think just as it is currently, I think that people just have to butt heads until they work out a budget. And so I think that's a bad idea, and we should take that. So in other words, what I think is a bad idea is the notion that two people get in a room, they can't come to an agreement, and we end up set the budget, which then, wow, who's going to, it just doesn't seem like the right approach.
So this was actually added after we reviewed this at FNA, and we took back your comments and we added in additional people work than if two mayors cannot come to an agreement. Because at that point, the only option was mediation. So here, we're putting more people in the room to talk through the budget.
Which Mayor, I think I meant in my comment to acknowledge that actually there was a whole number of things that I know I brought up at FNA, and they're almost all addressed. And I really appreciate that and think that's fantastic. And I think adding this in, the part that's added in, subject to, I'm interested in Councilmember Watten's view on this, but that seemed to make sense. The only part I don't like is the idea that it would ever go to mediation. The budget should never go to mediation, in my view.
Just a clarification about the term mediation, that's a non-binding process. The parties get together and they negotiate with a skilled neutral facilitator. The mediator would never get to say, okay, city, your budget is this, and city, your budget is that. It would be a negotiation facilitated by a neutral. That's all the mediation means.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a clause, but the thing I didn't understand is it seemed like the losing party would have to pay for this arbitration. I didn't really understand how that worked. Like, where would the funding come for the mediator?
So it says all fees and expenses for the mediation shall be borne by the parties equally.
Ah, okay.
And each party shall bear its own expense of counsel, experts, witnesses, preparation. So everybody pays their own boat for mediation.
All right,
If
so
you were
yeah,
to use that process.
so that's very helpful. Thank you. My own view is it shouldn't go to mediation. The budget is set by this council for the city of Snoqualmie, and that's how it should remain.
To the point, can we
Mayor Pro
add
Tem Holloway.
non-binding remediation? And I think that'll address
Again.
your issue.
We can't hear you.
But to the point, can we add non-binding mediation? So
We can add that, but
10
it-
years
it-
from now, there's no question.
Yeah, I mean, it refers to the statute, which is, that's the process is set out in the statute. It's not a binding procedure for anybody.
Understand, the statute may change. Other people may not read that statute and read into it certain specific things. Let's call it what it is, non-binding remediation. Mediation, sorry. Different mind.
Councilor Watton and then Councilor Washington.
Right. Thank you. I'd like to propose an amendment, the first one, and that is on the basis of what could be problematic of having autocratic decision-making for us by two individuals and decision-making by a vacuum. Again, I come back to, a couple incidents already in the last few months that were uncovered by the liaisons that were involved, even though non-voting liaisons. and it did make an impact on it. I believe that it is in our best interest to take section 6.1 membership that reads the Meadowbrook Farm governing body shall be comprised of the mayor of the city of city of Snoqualmie, each individually a member and collectively as members. And I would add in, additionally, each city council shall designate 2 council representatives with equal voting privileges. The chair of the governing body will alternate annually between the mayor of each of the cities starting in January 1st, 2024, with the longest serving mayor as the first chair, and then alternating after that. Striking each member may appoint a designee to serve in the absence or unavailability of the member. Is there a second?
If you say longer.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Watton and second by Councilor Mayhew with the amendment that he just stated.
I can send that over to you if you need.
I have it.
You have it, okay.
Councilor Mayhew,
Yeah, move to amend the previous motion to appoint, instead of 2 council members from each city, 1 council member from each city.
Second.
it's been moved by Councilor Mayhew and second by
Councilor Johnson.
Councilor Johnson. 2.1 council member. Okay. Any discussion? This whole thing has already been approved by North Bend, just so you know.
North Bend is
ILA.
aware of this too. And
They are, and they don't necessarily agree with it, but we'll move on. Any discussion?
I'm doing mediation.
That discussion, not wisecracks.
Is it getting too detailed where you talk about when the chairs alternate? I'm just wondering. Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I would be concerned if we had on top of one of the council members serving as on the governing body, however you want to phrase that, to also have a liaison to another position. I think that gets to Mayor Pro Tem's concern about how many resources were designated to this one group. I'd be good with the motion on the table, but I'd say, well, then let's just not have a second liaison or something like that. So we're not dedicating too much from this body to this one cause when there are other causes that we should have 3 liaisons too if we could afford the time.
Right. Okay, any further discussion? So we have 2 motions on the table. So the first one is the original motion, but changing it to 121. Councilmember. So the way that it reads
yes,
would be Meadowbrook Farm governing bodies shall be comprised of the mayor of the city of North Bend and the mayor of the city of Snoqualmie, individually a member and collectively members. Additionally, each city council shall designate 2, which would be now 1 based on the revised council representatives with equal voting privileges. The chair of the governing body will alternate annually between the mayor of each the city starting in January 1st, 2024, with the longest serving mayor. Councilor Benson?
Is there a way at this point to go with Councilman Johnson's recommendation that we eliminate the liaison portion of this?
Well, there's not a motion on that yet. There's not one.
Oh, okay, all
So-
right. And then it'd just be the longer serving mayor, not the longest. We're only dealing with 2 cities.
That is true.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything that specifies council liaisons. If I'm mistaken, then correct me. So we don't need to, I don't think, make an amendment on that. It's just that we decide who we're gonna have liaisons for and stuff as a council, right? So just going forward, Mayor Pro Tem would perhaps just not appoint someone to be a liaison separately. And that's just kind of an internal thing for us.
Counselor Johnson? Vincent?
Yeah, I guess
Same
that makes
SON.
sense. If North Bend wanted to also have a liaison attending in addition to the voting council member, no problem with that. Yeah, yeah, good point.
Okay. Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Right. So back to the original motion. Any further discussion on the ILA? Counselor
Point of
Mayhew?
order. Didn't we need to take two votes? The first was to amend and then was to whether to adopt it or not.
Okay, I can do that. I did read in when I read it, one council representative.
But there was two motions, so I think we have to vote on each one.
Right.
Okay, so we voted on appointing one council member.
Yeah.
Amending the motion. You voted on amending the motion.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now we're amending it with what I read, changing from 2 to 1.
No, we already
No,
changed 2 to
we're-
1.
We just changed 2 to 1.
Right.
Now we're voting
Now we're
on,
voting of replacing just the mayor with the mayor and council and all the other changes we talked about. The big change, big dinosaur, right?
Okay, the big dinosaur, yes. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, so it's approved by 6 and no by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. Councilor Mayhew?
Move to strike the words at the end of section 6.3.1. Close to the end of that, second line from the bottom reads, negotiate and agree to resolution. Strike the remaining words to the end of that sentence. So strike the words prior to invoking the mediation process set forth in section 12 below.
Seconded.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councilor Mayhew and second by Councilor Benson. To strike the words basically on page 4, 6.3.1.
Prior to invoking.
Prior to invoking the mediation process set forth in section 12 below. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Councilor Johnson?
Can I just have a second to read something before we vote?
Yes.
I might have a concern.
What are you changing?
Councilor Johnson?
Okay, so the motion on the table is to strike from prior to the end of the sentence, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, so my concern here is that it says that if the members disagree as to the budget or the relative contribution due to each member, the city councils of each member shall appoint a representative to meet together with the governing body. So I just wanted to make it clear, that means now, based on our last motion, that we'd be appointing another city council member. So
or
then
the
there would be
li-
a second one.
or the liaison.
Right, or I think that we'd be appointing one of our council members to help out the governing body with resolving that. So now we'd have
what this
the
says.
two mayors.
But instead, you're proposing.
I'm not making a proposal. I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, each at
Yeah.
one, get to that step, you would have the mayor and 2 council members in there trying to resolve the issue.
So now we'd have, yes, that.
Does that what we want? Now you have 4 people already. Councilor Washington?
Well, does it make sense to just have the current liaison have that position?
I don't know yet. Councilor Johnson?
I think the idea now is that we wouldn't have a separate liaison. So that position would go away under
So
the current proposal.
liaison discussion is not germane to the matter at hand.
Okay.
No.
We will, according to this, we would select a member of the council to go help make the decision. That may or may not be the liaison. It could be any way we want. We will pick somebody to go help. That's all it says.
Councilor Washington.
I guess, well, my proposal would be why select another individual? Why not just allow the liaison?
When we get into that position, make that proposal. We're not there yet.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Councilor Johnson.
I think I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure that we were all clear as to how that could be a problem, but I think that the idea is that we would have then a second person from our council to have more eyes on it, and I think I'm okay with that. Hopefully we won't run into this problem too many times.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Okay, so the motion is to remove prior to invoking the mediation process through the rest of the sentence. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, so that passes with Mayor Pro Tem Holloway voting no. Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, so I wonder if we could get advice from city attorney. In that section 6.3.1, as I raised earlier, there's a sentence that reads, the member cities shall approve the budget by no later than December 1st, prior to the start of each biennium. I'm interested in the effect of the word shall in the event that one or both of the cities had not, in fact, approved the budget. And I would point out that the Snoqualmie City Council is only required to pass our budget, which presumably would include our portion of this by December 31st, not December 1st. And so therefore, it seems reasonably likely to me that in the future, we would not meet this requirement. And so I'm wondering what the effect of this word shall would have, and because I'm worried we need to reword it, but what would be the effect of this word shall if indeed we did not do it?
The intention behind that was that everybody knew they had to adopt a budget for this ILA to govern this ILA by December 1st, because each party needs to be able to then go and adopt their own budget based on what they've just agreed to contribute to the farm operation. So, and I've seen this, if used this kind of deadline used effectively in a lot of other multi-jurisdictional ILAs where each council has to approve some budgetary allocation. And because they have their own process they have to run through, they need to know what they're on the hook for before they approve anything internally. So the idea behind this is everybody knows by at least December 1st what you're going to put on the table to fund this operation. And then you can proceed with your normal budget adoption process.
So that makes great sense. Thank you. That eases my mind quite a bit, but I'm still curious, what if we don't? This word shall, what then would be the impact of failing to do that?
Well, then you'd have a dispute, and then you'd have this potential mediation process that's outlined in section 12, I believe, where you could talk it out informally first and then go to a mediator if you wanted to invoke that process. And then, of course, there's always the chance for litigation if the city feels like its asset is not being adequately protected because the other city is not putting in the money that it is supposed to pony up.
So let's, Councilor Watton.
Thank you, Mayor. May we amend the shall to should?
Or could if they wanna.
Could if they want you. You might have a hard time
Is there a
typing that in.
Is there a second to
If you
the
wanna.
amendment?
Second.
Yeah, it needs to be in
Second, the motion.
So the motion was to add
Change the wording from shall to should by December 1st.
those.
May I make one comment on that? So bear in mind, if you do make that change, that means you have no leverage over the other city if they do not timely provide you a budget number. So it's a two-way, gives you flexibility, but it also means then they have the same flexibility.
We know where McFarland lives. We'll go have a talk with him.
It's 10 years.
So it's moved by Counselor Watton, and second by Counselor Mayhew to change shall to should. Which is non-binding. Counselor Benson?
Yeah, to Councilman Mayhew's point, though, we don't really have that leverage anyway. I mean, North Bend doesn't get to decide what we're going to pass as our budget any more than we have. I think the appropriate term is should, because it is something that we should come to an agreement on in time to pass our own budget. But realistically, we don't get to tell North Bend what their budget is any more than they get to tell us. So should seems to me the appropriate word.
Okay. All those agree to change shall to should? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, it has passed. We have moved, changed the word shall to should. Counselor Mayhew?
I have one last question on this today, which is in section 6.3.4. I didn't understand how this section interacted with the budget process that we've just been spending time on in section 6.3.1. Because in section 6.3.4, it talks about provision of various things, some of which I would have thought were part of the budget, like insurance or utilities or garbage service. So it says that there's these specified services and then this vague term, other support services associated with maintenance and protection. And then what it says is each party to this agreement will contribute financially in an amount equal to 1/2 of the cost of these additional services. So I got confused. Are these things above and beyond the budget? And if so, I don't think we should blindly agree to just pay half of whatever it is. But maybe that's not what this says. So I'm kind of confused.
So I'll take a crack. I wasn't a participant in the negotiations here, so I'm just kind of speculating based on what I thought I understood the situation to be. And so the mayor can tell me if I'm totally off base. But I think what the design of this provision was, there are some specific operational expenses and overhead expenses like insurance, police protection, fire protection. And those would be a subset of the larger budget mentioned above, but the understanding would being, look, these are things that both cities are already, this property is already covered under the city's risk pool coverage. It's probably also covered under North Bend. So there's already a lot of overlapping responsibility for these items. And so, but to the extent they need to be added into the budget, there's sort of a default that it would be half of the cost because each city owns a joint undivided interest in the farm itself. So those types of sort of indivisible overhead expenses should just be split 50-50. Am I off base there, Mayor?
No, that sounds right. And usually the budget that we would be reviewing is like the Skyview maintenance and operating agreement, right? So they're going to tell you how many times they're going to mow and set up dances and all types of stuff, right? So that's what they're going to focus on. But then we also have our basic requirements that each city has been providing and that we need to continue providing, which are the police services and the rest of these.
So just follow-up question, that's what I thought it meant until I got to garbage service, utilities. Do they not include in their budget the cost of garbage services and utilities? Those didn't seem like above and beyond thing. That seemed like exactly what would be in the budget, those two items. The rest, insurance, police protection, fire protection. Okay, I got it. That explanation made sense to me. But the garbage service and utilities, and then and other support services seemed like a big like why aren't those in the? It seemed to me those should be in the budget. So that worried me.
Right, but I think we're approving those. Those would be part of our budget, or, I mean, these would probably just, I mean, we have monthly garbage services, right? Or if we
Mm.
have, we're gonna send our police over there, right? We're
Yeah.
gonna provide services, et cetera, so. Counselor Watton?
So I think the intent here was to memorialize how those things are handled, because in the past, it's been the Meadowbrook Association governing body where they're being moved over, well, not moved over, they're being positioned as docents and programming, not dealing with the day-to-day stuff. And I think it's just trying to help clarify the cities are going to be responsible for overseeing that, and not the Sideview Parks.
Right,
Is that correct?
yes. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
I really don't want to do this. So if I take these two extremes, North Bend could decide to build a community center there. And we're then obligated to pay for half of that. And the other extreme is if the cities get loggerheads, you could get it into a bidding war of who's willing to contribute as much money to have the other city relinquish their rights because they're not going to match the funds for the farm. I agreed they're ridiculous, but I look at Pacifica, occasionally local government goes ridiculous. So I agree with the intent that it should be half and half. I don't agree with relinquishing ownership rights as a consequence of not meeting that mark.
So my understanding is anything like a community center or anything like that, that would be a capital improvement that would have to be voted on and amending the, what's it called, the master plan?
Right.
And the
Gazebo,
council
cut
would
it
have
down
to
under capital,
authorize.
Gazebo. You specifically said in here, any, where was it? Infrastructure improvements or something along those lines. Maintenance, protection of the property, including interpretive center and associate infrastructure improvements.
Maintenance of those things, not constructing new ones. The protection of the property, including the interpretive center.
Point of order or point of clarification.
Say your point.
And that is the current arrangement that is in the deed is not to construct additional properties. Is that correct? Or am I misinterpreting that? I believe there's some deed restrictions when it was transferred from King County
Right,
to the two cities for
Right.
management.
there is. And they're attached to your
Okay, it's in here.
part of the
That's
inserts,
more-
but
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, move to strike the words in section 6.3.4 to strike the entire rest of the section after the words fire protection.
So who's paying for it then?
Budget. Everything that isn't one of those things that remains then goes into the budget.
So it's been moved, well. I heard a second.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councilor Mayhew, second by Councilor Washington to strike everything past fire protection.
Everything?
The service, what? Utilities, so we're not compare utilities. And other support services? Tell me to where are we striking it?
Yeah, after the word fire protection, there would then be a period and all the rest of the section would go away. Which means any costs other than those would have to have been would have to be covered in the budget.
So we're
And
getting
it
rid of
also
all the rest of
removes-
sentences?
Yeah, and it also removes this notion that we would relinquish ownership privileges. So just everything after the word fire protection and leaves all other costs having to be covered by the budget.
And most likely the budget that you would approve is attached to your farm operations and maintenance, which is next. And that budget does not have utilities in it. It does not have garbage service in it. It does not have insurance, police or fire protection, does not have those. And so this would be the budget that you would be working off of. Did you ever hand up, Councilor Watt- Councilor Watkins?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I do agree that this needs to be refined a little, but I wouldn't go that deep of a cut. I would go to line 9 of this, where it says, if a member does not fund its share of support services identified, the member shall relinquish voting privileges. I think that should be what's getting struck.
Second.
So it's an amendment to the amendment again.
So moved by Councilor Watkins, second by Councilor Mayhew, but where does it?
Starting with if a member does not fund, so everything comes back in this amendment, but strikes from if a member does not fund its share of the support services. La, la, la. The member shall relinquish voting privileges.
So then the remainder would be, you would keep in garbage service, utilities and everything down to.
The last sentence be struck and restore everything else.
Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, so I seconded that so that we can decide, let's try and get to decision. I don't agree with that though, because I imagine a situation where one half of this, look, one city plows its streets when it snows and one doesn't. Right? So I'm just worried about this thing being half of the setup is maintained in one manner and the other half is maintained in a very different manner. I would rather see this in the budget and therefore it actually gets worked out. So I'm going to vote no on this, but at the same time, look, it's not the end of the world. Things are working okay. They're managing to get it done. So if the will of the council is no, leave it out of the budget, then I don't think that's the worst outcome either. So whatever you guys think.
Councilor Johnson?
I'm sorry that I'm terribly lost in something here because I don't understand how garbage services and utilities and other such support services couldn't be in the budget. But I guess I'm a little bit lost on.
So we're agreeing.
I mean, okay, so the budget covers the police and the fire and the garbage and utilities and everything. Why would we take those out? I don't understand how removing those from these lists takes them out of the budget. I'm just a little bit confused here.
No, it takes them out of the farm budget and put it into the budget of the cities.
Thank you. That helps. Which budget we're talking about?
Yeah, which budget? There's 3 budgets floating around there.
Okay, thank you.
So my understanding.
Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, so my understanding in 6.3.4 is that these items will be in the city budget, each of the city's budgets, but not in the farm budget. So my motion to strike after the word fire protection, my intent is that all those things after that point would therefore have to go into the farm budget. And I'm going to vote in that manner, but if we decide to keep them separate, oh, okay, this isn't $1 million. I think it's a bad idea, but it's not the worst idea ever. So pick. I know.
Okay, so we're ready to vote on the
So, but
last. Oh, Councilor Mayhew.
To clarify though,
Mayor Pro Tem Polley.
the little dinosaur on the table is to strike from if a member does not fund on down.
Right.
You second that motion as a revision to your motion.
So what I thought I was that the amendment was to put back
Yes.
all the words prior to if a member does not
Okay.
fund.
Yes, that's my
That's what I thought I
understanding.
was second.
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
just saying something different,
Yeah.
but okay.
Okay.
It's actually a substitute motion.
Right,
We're not,
there's
we
no
can't
such
vote on
thing.
yours.
Not until you vote on his.
Okay.
It's all about me.
Okay, so we're gonna vote first on the leaving everything in, but striking the last sentence where it starts with if a member. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no.
No.
So that did not pass with Councilor Mayhew, Councilor Washington, Councilor Christensen, and Councilor Johnson voting against.
Where's the love?
Then
It's all on this end, baby. It's all on this end.
we're going back to the original motion, which was to get rid of everything after fire protection. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, so it passes, 6 voting and Mayor Pro Tem voting no.
You guys are making this complicated.
Okay, anything else? The original motion with those changes to vote for the Meadowbrook Farm Governance ILA. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
So they're all voted for except for Mayor Pro Tem Holloway voting against.
It's like the one Billy Goat Gruff.
Okay, moving on is the
Go on.
Meadowbrook Farm Operations Maintenance Service Agreement. This was pulled out
Bothering the hell out of me.
from consent agenda. And there was
All right.
one, I guess,
Believe that was an
question
FNA.
regarding that was the 6.1 in indemnification. Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, I believe that in the agreement we were just looking at, there is a nearly identical clause, but doesn't have the wording concern that I raised. So perhaps we just move to amend this agreement to substitute in the wording from the same clause in the other agreement that we just approved.
Second, assuming that that's allowed to do.
Yes.
That's
That's what I would
do.
Point of information, I don't know what we just did.
Yeah, I'm
So
lost
what are
too,
we
but
changing
yay.
in here and what are we changing it to? That's how you make a motion, guys. It's not whatever Fernducky did last Tuesday, I want to do today.
So the,
May I restate?
yes, please.
I believe the motion was to amend section 6.1 to parallel the language of the indemnification clause in the governance ILA.
It was pretty clear to me.
I'm a grumposaurus
Very
tonight.
safe.
All right.
Guys who-
You got a belly cap on.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay?
Do whatever.
Okay.
Did you just vote for that?
Voted for it. Wow.
Any other change? Okay, none. All those in favor of the Meadowbrook Farm Operations Maintenance Service Agreement, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? So it passes with that additional change. Okay. Moving on. So we did add the committee of the whole item, and we also have 4 executive sessions that we need to get through. Some of them are very pertinent timing. So Councilor Watton,
Point of order, I'd like to acknowledge the 2 members of the community that are here still tonight, and thank you for hanging in here with us.
there you go. Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, in the interest of time, are we at the item under committee of the whole?
Yes, we are.
In the interest of time, I move that we refer this topic to the F&A committee and ask them to report back to the full
Seconded.
council.
Nay.
So it was moved by Councilor Mayhew, second by Councilor Benson. And it was preliminary discussion funding employee costs with property tax and utility rates. Back to committee, F&A committee. Any discussion? Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, the sooner we can get on this, the better.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. I think at this point, we will, unless you want to hear it, we can skip the next reports. You can refer to the department reports in the agenda or the agenda packet. But we need to move on to the executive sessions unless you want to hear the mayor's report and other things. No? Okay, so
No
tonight
offense.
okay, so we have executive sessions pursuant to RCW 42.
Point of order, Mayor?
30, yes.
Move to
Councilor Mayhew.
extend the council meeting beyond 10 o'clock.
It's been moved by Councilor Mayhew and second by Councilor Johnson to extend the council meeting past 10 o'clock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
So there's 2 nays, Councilor Benson and Councilor Holloway. Okay, moving on. Tonight we have an executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101, little I and little 2 I's. So one is litigation that has been specifically threatened to which the agency, the governing body or member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party. And next one, litigation that the agency reasonably believes may be commenced by or against the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in an official capacity. And A with little eyes, 2 eyes.
Ruminants.
Ruminants, okay. To consider if in compliance with any required data security breach disclosure under RCW 255.010 and 42.56.590, and with legal counsel available information regarding the infrastructure and security of computer and telecommunication networks, security and security recovery plans, security risk assessments, and security test results to the extent that they identify specific system vulnerabilities and other information that, if made public, may increase the risk to the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of agency security or information technology infrastructure assets. And then finally, there will be a closed session pursuant to RCW 42.30.140 for B for the planning or adoption of a strategy or position to be taken during the course of any collective bargaining proceedings or reviewing the proposals made in the negotiations or proceedings lasting. So how many minutes? We'll do that. 30 minutes, okay.
Probably 30 minutes for the rest of it.
Okay, 30 minutes. So we will most likely, we will need probably 10 minutes for the first 3 each, and then 30 minutes for this last one. And we'll ask, let's see, interim city administrator Mike Chambliss, interim city attorney David Linehan, and interim chief Lynch to stay. And there's one item that we will be actually taking action on, and the rest we will not. So we will do that one first. That'll be a fairly quick one. So we will do that first and then come into session, take action, and then we'll go into the rest of the executive sessions and closed session. And no action is anticipated following conclusion of those executive session and closed session. So the council then would adjourn directly from the executive session and not return to the session. So the clerk will be informed of concluding times for which will be reflected in the meeting minutes.